I like to call this Ways and Means hearing with the judicial branch to order. Uh, and pursuant to the OGA, the agenda has been passed out in advance. And with that, I do believe we have a quorum. And before we start, I would like to introduce myself. I am Rep. Yumo, uh, Chairman for the Ways and Means. To my left, I have my Vice Chair, Representative Blas Atal. And on the floor, we have Representative Marissa Flores, Chairwoman of JGO. And across, we have Representative uh, TJ Manglonia, a member. And to his left, we have Representative Danita Yangtamay. And to her left, we have member and chairman of the FFA, Representative Vicente Camacho. And to his left, we have our legislative assistant, Ms. Claire Sablan, along with TG to my right, our financial analyst and our counsel, John. And Dell, our IT today. And before we move to the statement from the Chief Justice on item 3, is there anyone in the uh, gallery that would like to make a public statement? Being there's none, before we start, Ms. V, can you please approach? Thank you for being here. And with that, thank you again, Chief Justice, for bringing your team here, your directors and managers, and um, discuss the budget. As we all know, it's going to be a trying year, but I do notice that there is no change with the submittal from last fiscal year. I understand the request is more, but and with that, I will get into the details, and I will now offer the floor to CJ Castro. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. Before we start, CJ, I have to motion to adopt today's agenda, just over in the procedure or in line.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There has been a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The agenda has been adopted. Thank you. The floor back to you, CJ.
Mr. Chairman, buenas, half a day, dyan tirowanik para todos si elected leaders in the House. Tangkulo na for giving the third branch of our government the opportunity to justify its FY 2024 budget request. A copy of our request was provided to the Office of Management and Budget and the Fiscal Analyst. First and foremost, I would like to thank Governor Palacios and Lieutenant Governor Apatang, Senate President Edith De Leon Guerrero, and members of the Senate, Speaker Edmund Villagomez, and members of the House for their continuing support to the judiciary. With your support in maintaining the rule of law, our community on Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda is a peaceful and safe place to live in. I believe that one of the most difficult tasks for this body is allocating the budget of our government. Everyone is knocking on your doors asking for money. This is a monumental task, especially at a time when our revenue collection is extremely low. As the head of the third branch of our government, I take this responsibility seriously. I want to make sure that our request accurately reflects the needs of the courts on Saipan, Tenian, and Rhoda, as opposed to simply submitting a wish list to the legislature. Before we came here this morning, the judiciary went through a two-step process internally. Step one, we asked each and every division in the courts to submit in writing what they really need in their division so that they can deliver quality judicial services to our people. Step two, once we receive this information, our internal finance committee, made up of myself, Justice Manglona, Justice Enos, PJ Naraha, Judge Kim Tenorio, Director of Court Sonia Camacho, and our Budget and Finance Director John Villagomez met and closely examined these submissions. And after weighing all the needs of our courts, we formulated the budget now before you. The judiciary's request, in a nutshell, basically covers the justices and judges' constitutionally protected compensation, the needs of court administration, the Supreme Court, the Superior Court, which covers the Family Court, Drug Court, Mental Health Court, Small Claims Court, Office of Adult Probation, the Law Revision Commission, the water, power, building, and ground maintenance of the courthouses on Saipan, Tenian, and Rhoda, the telephone, internet, and other technological equipment in the courts on Saipan, Tenian, and Rhoda, the airline tickets, food, and lodging to and from Tenian and Rhoda twice a month for the monthly court calendar in those islands, and the funding for language access, which is federally mandated, and for court appointed attorneys for our poor people, which is constitutionally required. There are many different ways to address the CNMI budget. I would like to share my personal observation and experience in the last 34 years. Is the Office of Management and Budget unintentionally, and I repeat, in quote, unintentionally places the judiciary's request at an executive branch level department and not as a separate branch of government. As a result, the judiciary is always on the bottom of the totem pole and underfunded. May I therefore recommend that this year we approach the budget process differently. First, let us acknowledge that there are three branches of government and fund those branches accordingly. Because our fiscal condition today, the judiciary supports, and I repeat, supports the governor's submission with respect to the personnel category of $5.8 million, but we strenuously opposed the $300,000 allocation in the all others category. This amount will only allow the courts to operate roughly 3 months into the fiscal year. And then we have to close the doors of our courthouses on Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda. I do not think, knowing the governor, knowing the lieutenant governor, I do not think that they will support such an unintended consequences. The judiciary roughly needs an additional $900,000 on top of the $300,000 in the all others category, bringing our recommendation, our request up to $1.2 million. As the third, that amount, $1.2 million, sounds too much for a department, and I agree. But as a third branch of our government, that $1.2 million request is more than reasonable and, more importantly, essential. Please help us deliver a quality judicial services to our people on Rhoda, Tinian, and Saipan. I now yield to Justice Manglona.
Good morning, Chairman Yumo, Vice Chairman Attao, and members of the committee and members of the legislature. A few months ago, we had the opportunity to meet, I guess, the two freshman legislators here at the Law of the Freshman program. I'm happy to see you again, and I hope that your first 6 months went well. And if you remember at that freshman program, we lightly touch on the judiciary's budget needs. But a light touch is not possible today. We need to discuss the serious concerns we have with the current budget proposal, particularly the $316,000 all others for operations. Some members here were present at last year's committee hearing where we discussed a range of accomplishments and ongoing projects, including major technology improvements, which were all made possible by ARPA funding. ARPA represented a very important promise to the judiciary. That promise was that we would be able to move forward and even improve our operations despite the hardships of 2021, 2022. And you can see from our monthly reports on our actions that the judiciary took this promise seriously. We relied on it, and we had concrete plans for investment and implementation of long overdue technology and facilities improvements. But little did we know that the 4-year spending plan would only get to first base. Early this year, we received the news that the promise of ARPA funding was hanging by a thread, and that a substantial portion of the $14 million granted to the judiciary may not materialize. To date, we have only expended 47% of that promised funding. There is now a serious risk that many of our projects, which we planned in reliance on the full award, will not be completed. We have just concluded the 2018-22 strategic plan for the courts, and now we are working and will soon release our next 5-year plan, which will address major areas for progress. Our strategic plan is based on the input of stakeholders, including the legislature. But all that input and planning will go to waste without the necessary funding to put them into action. I want to give you some details on these important projects in 3 areas to show what we have achieved under the previous plan and what we still hope to achieve when we get the support we need. First, we are prioritizing technological and digitization advances. In November 2022, we became the first jurisdiction in the Pacific region to launch a comprehensive e-recording system, allowing users to file and record land documents entirely online. This will assist commerce in the islands, and Justice Enos will soon tell you more about this important project. In addition, we are embarking on the new e-court case management system. This e-court system makes case information immediately available online for user access, increasing processing speed and greater capability for the public to access filings. And included in this project are e-citations and e-probation. We are working in tandem with the Department of Public Safety on the e-citation project to truly get it off the ground on all 3 islands this time around. It's an ambitious project, but necessary. We need to streamline the wait time between when an offender receives a traffic ticket and the ultimate disposition of that ticket or case in the courtroom. We have already observed how eCourt is streamlining case flow and digital record keeping and facilitating real-time access to court judgments and protective orders and judicial decrees. We continue our efforts to digitize files dating back to the Trust Territory times. In 2022 alone, our scanning team digitized over 400,000 pages of files, unaudited over 500,000 pages, which is really a monotonous and tedious task for our 5 staffers on Rota, Tinian, and Saipan. But it is an important record-keeping process. And second, we are investing in improvements to facilities. We have made substantial progress on plans for a new data center at the Guma Justicia to house and safeguard the judiciary's valuable equipment. The data center, now at the final A&E stage, will protect crucial technology infrastructure investments from damages associated with typhoons and flooding and, God forbid, fire. We do not want the technology hub to continue to be cramped and susceptible to destruction. We need to make additional facilities improvements, including removal and replacement of the fire alarm system, because we've got a warning from DFAMS already, and we need to modernize our elevators. So that is what we plan as far as facilities at the courthouses. And third, we have continued to focus on our most important resource, which is our people, and you see them in back of me today, and a lot others at the Guma Justicia and the other 2 islands. And the court has utilized its staff efficiently to deliver services and implement new projects. Our high quality and professional workforce is necessary to maintain compliance with applicable federal laws, such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act. For example, we have continued to enhance services available to persons with limited English proficiency through updating our language access plan and policy and holding workshops for court interpreters and staff. And some federal funding has allowed a few of our staff at drug court and mental health court to receive needed specialized training. But we continue to lose a number of our trained staffers to other government agencies offering higher salaries. And the judiciary is renowned for quality employees ready to be poached. So as you can see, we are holding on to the promise of ARPA and local funding, and there is much work yet to be done. The judiciary has made positive developments on technology, facilities improvement, personnel, and of course, community outreach. But we won't be able to accomplish much without your assistance. If we take a look at the current proposal of $316,000 or others that was submitted to the legislature, this is not practical and it's not realistic. The math says this is about $865 per day to operate the Guma Justicia, Cotintinian, Rhoda Central Justicia, Drug Court, Mental Health Court, $865 a day. This is simply not the way to operate the third branch of government. And Suzus Masi for listening to the judiciary. Now Justice Enos will provide some more details. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Yumo, Vice Chair Atao, and members of this committee. I have good news. First of all, I want to, last year I came here and part of the presentation that I made was that we're working on our electronic recording. Well, that's done. We did a soft opening last October. And now everyone from the comfort of your home, you can just record your land transactions, UCC, and other documents that by law would have to be required in order for them to have the authenticity that the law requires. And so I checked this morning how much money we've made so far, and Holly Camacho, who is our acting recorder, says that we've raked in about $63,524.50. And I think that figure is small because we still need to upload our historical data, our historical land documents. We're still scanning, and I think we have a contract out to scan several million pages of documents dating 2010 back to the trust territory era. So that's the challenge. Another challenge is that this system is still new to us. We're still trying to address on almost a daily basis system error. So if you're experiencing difficulties or delay in your document not being recorded or taken care of right away, please just give us more patience. We're dealing with it, and our on-site, on-island contractor is doing its best to try to assist us to get that covered and addressed. We have 4 self-help centers on Saipan, where if you don't have computer at home, you can come down to the courthouse and we'll take care of that. There is one on Rota and one on Tinian. So that is with e-recording. I also want to thank Congresswoman Flores for really helping the judiciary with the rules. And I understand legal counsel Bradley here is very helpful in moving forward those rules. The rules that you can expect to come before your committee are the rules of criminal procedure, rules of traffic procedure, disciplinary rules, rules of probate, and rules of evidence. So you can expect that towards the end of the year. Now, I would like to, on a more serious note, talk a little bit more about the matter of CUC.
So the budget request of the judiciary over the years has been based on historical usage. So whatever we use for the previous year, and according to finance manager John Villagomez, he says that our average monthly usage is around $60,000. So peg that 12 times a year, $720. We've always been under budgeted for this particular need. And it will be a continuing saga if again we get something lower than $720. So this is not a guesswork, as you all know. Uh, we will continue to be under budget and be deficient in that amount and accumulated over the years. It still goes up to the millions of dollars. Now, the judiciary received a disconnection notice a couple of months ago, and we're trying to address that. We're really put in a bad situation because, I mean, how do you address uh, a usage, a deficiency in your electricity bill if we just don't have the funds? Uh, One way to address that is to ask the legislature to please consider enacting a law that takes off disconnection as an option for the judiciary. And this is why to many government agencies, when your electricity is disconnected, you can still provide your services. With the judiciary, it's a different story. In reality, a disconnection to Guma Justicia, to all these services, means that the third branch of government will shut down. The entire branch, your sister branch, will shut down. It is not like some uh, interagency divisions or other instrumentalities of the CNMI government. It is totally different with the judiciary. We are all contained in one unit, in one building, practically. 90% of all of our work is at Goma Justicia. When you disconnect, when CUC disconnects power, water, and sewer services, we're done. This is constitutionally unacceptable. Please consider enacting a law taking off the table disconnection to CUC. Consider that, please. Uh, and so we request that this year we are asking for $2.8 million, and this is to cover fiscal year 2024 and to address the arrearages. And with that, I'm going to give Presiding Judge Naroja the table, the floor.
Thank you, Justice Innes. Good morning, Chairman Yumo, Vice Chair Atal, and members of this House Ways and Means Committee. As the Mental Health Court Judge, please allow me to share a few remarks with you regarding the criticalness of this newly established CNMI Mental Health Court docket. As some of you may be aware of this national statistic, according to data from National Conference on Juvenile Justice, violence is the biggest killer in U.S. history. In many cases, the committing of serious violent offenses against others, including homicide, is indicative of behavioral signs that the aggressor, the perpetrator, suffers from either major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia, or another serious dysfunctional mental impairment. And many times these mental impairments are co-occurring. Our mental health core participants have been diagnosed with either schizophrenia, methamphetamine use disorder, cannabis use disorder, or schizoaffective disorder, and bipolar type, an occurrence of manic psychotic features, or major depressive disorder, and severe alcohol use disorder, or intellectual disability, and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. The troubling concern is that there is no cures for most mental illness. For our participants who are all suffering from these serious mental illness, the reality is that because there is no cure, they must effectively receive regular treatment in order to minimize their symptoms and help them improve their quality of life. So, what is our goal? Is likely your question. Our goal is to break the cycle of reoffending for our participant and to promote recovery. Recovery in this instant is defined as long-term behavioral change. It is not just short-term clinical and legal compliance. Recovery for our participant is a journey, not a destination. The key and critical components of our mental health core are our treatment partners. The only treatment providers available to the mental health core program at this time is CHCC, SAR, SAAR, and the Canman Community Health Center. Our treatment partner with CHCC includes the CHCC Psychiatric Unit, the Community Guidance Center that comprises of the Addiction Service Unit, ASU, Transition Living Center, TLC, and the Gary Lee Smith Youth Suicide Prevention Program, GLS. Outside of CHCC, we also collaborate with the Kangman Health Community Center and the Hope Recovery Center Substance Abuse, Addiction, and Rehabilitation Program, SAR. Our other critical shareholders include the Office of the Public Defender, the Office of the Attorney General, the Department of Correction, and the Department of Public Safety. In light of the extremely limited treatment resources and availabilities in the CNMI, our mental health policies only allow participants with serious mental illness into the program. Mental illness can be categorized by varying degrees of severity, commonly described as mild, moderate, or serious mental illness. These terms are used too broadly to indicate the impact of the illness on an individual functioning and well-being. Our mental health core program only accepts offenders with serious mental illness. The challenges associated with the lack of treatment option and treatment resources significantly impact our mental health court program. Limited availability and accessibility of mental health services, inadequate resources, and a shortage of mental health professionals contribute to the delays in assessment, treatment, and support services. As a result, individuals encounter extended waiting periods before receiving necessary care. Furthermore, insufficient attention to individual needs by providers can hinder effective communication and coordinated care plans. On top of the insufficient treatment resources in the CNMI, we also face inadequate shelter facilities, thereby hindering stability and engagement in treatment. The lack of support for basic needs frequently diverts our focus from recovery. Thus, we have begun making efforts to expand the mental health court to attend to these existing concerns. To address the limited availability and accessibility of mental health treatment services, our mental health court has applied for a federal grant through the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, GMHCP. The GMHCP grant is for the amount of $536,481 to improve outcomes for individuals with mental health and co-occurring substance use disorder. The goal is to enhance coordination, assessment, and timely treatment to address each participant needs. The GMHCP grant will allow us to increase treatment availability and access to our mental health court by expanding our professional treatment provider pool through telehealth and telemedicine. We are also revisiting the eligibility criteria policy. We will be proposing to amend the policy and procedure to consider the inclusion of individuals with moderate mental illness, as well as the inclusion of offenders who have not been found legally competent to stand trial, but who can benefit from the programs so that the range of individuals who may receive assistance can be broadened. Through Congressman Gregorio Kalili Sablan, a BGA Burn Discretionary Community Project Grant has been awarded to your judiciary in the amount of $303,000. This provides technical assistance for assessing the feasibility of implementing a mental health treatment court docket specifically tailored to assist veterans. Under this grant, a contractor will be conducting research and compiling data to assess the feasibility of establishing court services for veterans. The contractor will also develop policies and procedures, and if needed, will propose the enactment or amendments of correlating regulatory rules and or legislative statutes. Under the Judicial Assistant Mental Health Court docket policy and procedure, a part is provided for the inclusion of veteran participant. Thus, we have set aside a budget of about $138,300 under the BGA Burn Discretionary Grant, which shall be allocated for personal training and ensuring of adequate preparation for the successful implementation of mental health court for veterans. I ask this committee, this legislative body, for your continued support of our mission to best address the needs of our community members suffering from mental illness who enter our criminal justice system, and in turn keep our community healthier and safer. I thank you for your time and stand ready to answer any question you may have. I'm also assigned to also appeal to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee, to give us that $1.3 million for our operation, because $316,000 is really inadequate. Also, the indigent fees. Our indigent services is pretty broad. We cover fees for attorneys' fees, interpretation fees, psychiatric and other professional services, investigators to criminal defendants. These are all constitutional mandates. So the budget that we're asking, the amount is 200,000. So with that, I yield to Your Honor, Judge Kim Tenorio.
Good morning, Chairman and members of this body. Thank you for having us today to discuss the judiciary's budgetary needs for fiscal year 2024. A lot of seriousness up here, and I thank our justices and our presiding judge for discussing much of the operations and the necessities of the judiciary, and I'll shift my focus a little bit. So the past several years, I've come before this body to defend and answer questions about the judiciary's budget. I've always talked about drug court. I won't do that today because after 7 years, the community and our leaders have witnessed the success of drug court and are definitely more aware of the program, its importance, and how it works. I will, however, be ready to answer any questions you may have about drug court, any stats or any other questions. We also have legislation we would eventually like to present to you. I've discussed this with Congressman J.P. Sablan, who has been a champion for the drug court since its inception, along with other veteran members of this body, to create other treatment courts as needed. So when drug court was created, it was other treatment courts were not envisioned. So it was a piecemeal legislation. And then we created mental health court through a rule by the Supreme Court. And so instead of piecemealing these treatment courts, we would like to introduce at some point, have a comprehensive legislation to address all treatment courts that we may create within the judiciary. So today I'd like to focus on family court, and I'd like to share its importance and why your support for the judiciary's budget is imperative by shifting the focus from the operations to allowing me to share some real life scenarios. For example, I hear cases, emergency hearings to address child abuse and protect children from further harm. I preside over TROs involving minors who have somehow learned that violence towards their boyfriend, girlfriend, or partners is acceptable. Also, TROs involving minors who, in this age of technology, take screenshots of their partners in compromising situations and unleash it into the World Wide Web. Divorces involving domestic violence and playing tug of war with children. These are just a few examples. And of course, when I think I've seen it all, I'm proven wrong. And a new type of case comes before the family court. Regardless of their socioeconomic status, these individuals are victims and deserve protection and resolution of their issues through the law. In order to do that, the judiciary must be adequately funded. Reiterating what CJ said, please ensure we stay open beyond December. $316,000 is simply insufficient for the third branch of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Kim.
And I'll yield now to our Director of Courts.
Good morning, honorable members of the Committee on Ways and Means. Thank you for the opportunity for us to come before you today. We are very honored. In addition to the members of the bench present with us, we also have members of our leadership team who are here to assist with any questions you may have concerning our different departments. They are the Clerk of the Supreme Court, Judy Aldan, Family Court Manager, Crystal Pangilinan, Drug Court Manager, Edward Diaz, Mental Health Court Manager Danielle Su, Chief Probation Officer Matilde H. Bermudez Rasa, Budget and Finance Director John Villagomez, Procurement Officer Christine Aninzo, Chief Marshal Jason Tarkong, Grants Administrator Jim Stoll, Systems Administrator Michael Villacruzes, Acting Human Resources Officer Rebecca Santos on behalf of Michelle Guerrero, Acting Commonwealth Recorder Holly Camacho on behalf of Kelsey Aldan, and our ARPA Administrator Martha Standish, our General Counsel Hyun J. Lee, and LRC Executive Director Dean Palacios. Also present with us, representing the CNMI Bar Association today, is Attorney Keith Chambers III. As you heard earlier, in February of this year, the Judicial Council approved the Judiciary's fiscal year 2024 budget proposal, and on March 15, 2023, the Judiciary submitted that proposal before this body and the Senate. A copy was sent to the executive branch. The request covers personnel costs at $8,370,000, operations at $1,497,000, and the 1% public auditor's fee at $98,000. While cognizant of the impact of our request, we are respectfully informing this honorable body of the judiciary's needs for our people on Rota, Saipan, and Tinian, given the recent increase in revenue projections. The request, listed through 7 local accounts, covers costs for the 8 chambers, 15 departments, and 1 commission office, and is premised on our mission and vision as a branch, on national and evidence-based standards for trial and appellate courts, case management, on national trends to move towards a more evidence-based, rehabilitative approach to justice with more treatment courts, on the implementation of hybrid services post-pandemic, on maintaining workforce wellness and merit-based and competitive compensation plans for our staff, and on performance-based administrative programs that support judicial services and equal access that are acceptable nationally, locally, and within the region. The proposal considers our strategic plan, which you heard about earlier from the Honorable Justice Manglonia. Please help us in charting our combined successes forward. We highlight some areas of priorities that are currently underfunded and request your consideration for funding in professional services, those for indigent costs, like the presiding judge mentioned earlier, interpreters, like the Chief Justice alluded to, utilities. The disconnection notice that we received a month ago is still very much a discussion between us and both branches on how to address the arrears for the judiciary. But what remains too is how do we proceed in paying for utilities for our 3 courthouses in the CNMI. We also ask that travel be considered because inter-island dockets continue, notwithstanding certain services that may not be available because of the current proposal provided by the executive branch for all others. We also ask for your consideration in providing funding for our full-time employee positions. We currently have 127 NOPs that were allowed under the current fiscal year. We are asking that those that are unfunded be funded to address positions that are necessary for current offices that have mandates but are only operated through 1 to 2 personnel in those divisions. An example is our Commonwealth Recorder's Office. They operate for all 3 islands but only have 2 FTEs. We are seeking for additional FTEs across the board, and if there are funding to be allocated in that direction, we really respectfully request that you consider the judiciary as critical and be considered for that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sonia. Yeah. You still have the floor, CJ. Is that it?
With that should be it, and we are open to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, and thank you, CJ, and your team for the opening introduction and statement. I do recall last fiscal year budget, ARPA was used to address 3 areas, which was capital improvement, court renovations, and the specialty courts. I did remember that from last fiscal year, and that approximately $6 million was spent to address all of these issues. And I'm glad to hear that the goals and the strategic plan that the judicial branch implemented is actually in fruition right now. My first question is, of the 6 million that was allocated last fiscal year or the previous for under ARPA, are those vendors and contracts been paid to date?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a preface, as I mentioned earlier, the 6 million represents, it represents actual expenses and the encumbrances. And I just want to mention that that is, of course, 47% of the 14 million that we were given. If we take a look at, because of the instability and of the news that ARPA may be in jeopardy, the 6 million that we have spent or committed thus far represents just a little bit over 1% of the $480 million that was awarded to the CNMI. That is really hard to take because, again, as CJ mentioned, this is a third branch of government, and it only received 1.1 or 1.2 million out of the nearly $500 million that was given to the CNMI. Now, going back to your question about the $6 million, I mentioned the e-court case management project that is ongoing. We have committed about 800,000 of that. Half of it has been paid, and the other half will be paid in installments. There's also we call it the ARPA Hall Data Center, which will be used to extend the northern part of the Gumostisha near Marinas High School. That facility will house on the first floor a secured space. It's as I mentioned last year, it's like a bunker, and the A&E will be done in about 2 to 4 weeks, and we have paid. Uh, More than half of that, and the vendor is still waiting for payment on the 60% of the A&E. But we are asking the Secretary of Finance and DOF to assist us in making those payments because they are under contract. And of course, anybody should not violate a contract, but the judiciary should not because we expect non-payments or delinquencies to eventually come to the court, and we don't want to be a party in our own docket. So the other items we have entered into contracts, and some of them have been. There are balances. The e-recording project that has been fully paid, but there's still more to be done. I hope that answers your question.
And that does actually, just to clarify too as well. I know the e-court, obviously, there should be license fees that are involved. I'm not sure, did the judicial plan for these fees, and how would it pay for the future fees of this? I guess the software or the application you guys are using.
Okay, so there are license fees, and we estimate that it will be about 150,000 a year, and we are looking into possibilities if local funding is not available. Then the other agencies and departments, and I've discussed this briefly with, for example, drug court and mental health court, that they would have to apply for grants in 2 or 3 years when they become due. So they will subsidize the $150,000 of licenses. So, but ARPA, we have designated ARPA to cover at least the first 2 or 3 years of the case management system. The fees also, the court generates, we have the users, the attorneys, and the parties pay filing fees, and that can also be another way to generate revenue.
Thank you for the clarification. And I do understand, and I remember last budget, the court renovations, the updating of, I guess, the technology. Is that all complete already?
Um, we had an ambitious plan last year, and we tried to follow the strategic plan as far as technology is concerned. And in March of 2022, we met with the bench members and our team, and we allocated about $100,000 to $125,000 per courtroom. We have 8 courtrooms in the CNMI, and we were hoping, based on ARPA, to purchase technology equipment because we, of course, during the pandemic, we all saw the importance and the convenience of virtual technology. We're kind of behind on the technology, but we went through the procurement process. Everything is ready except for the NTP. As soon as we get clearance and the green light from the Department of Finance that there's ARPA funding available, we will release that NTP. I'm tempted to even mention to John that just release it. I think I mentioned it before. Just release it. We can we can't continue with the way court operations and the virtual hearings are proceeding right now. We need such equipment as assistive listening devices. Some of our attorneys are, they're past 60. I'm one of the justices that's past 60. It's hard for me to hear. And Siege, I just mentioned before this hearing, to assist him when he can't hear your questions. So, but our courtrooms, all our courtrooms, they don't have that technology. And that is such a basic equipment to have to make sure that you have a meaningful hearing, both if you're an attorney, if you're a party, or if you're a bench member. So that is just one example. Uh, so the short answer is no, we haven't proceeded because the NTP is still with Finance and Procurement Office. But we really would like to issue that as soon as possible because procurement of these technology equipment takes time, and we are competing with other buyers, and the vendors are are short on supplies.
Thank you, Justice. And lastly, I did remember Ms. Camacho stating that when the ARPA was issued or awarded to the judicial, most of them, or most of the amounts were obligated or encumbered. And then the news came earlier this year that there was to be hold. I do remember a couple of meetings with the executive branch that some ARPAs will be released, and I'm not sure if the courts are uh, included as far as the remaining ARPA.
So that remains to be seen. We have been in discussions with the executive branch as well as with the Secretary of Finance. And the initial information that reached us at the onset of this administration was we are going through transition. There are these transition reports that are coming in. We are unsure how to proceed until we know the figures fully. And then we received information that through the fiscal response team, there were some assessments being done there. We do have two awards to the judiciary. One is for 13 million, and the second one is for over $800,000, which was for the e-courts. Both awards have not been revoked. We are still continuing with them, and the encumbrances remain. The commitment from the executive branch, from the governor and the lieutenant governor, was that the contracts that are in place, we will take a look at them on a case-by-case basis and move forward depending on the availability of ARPA funding. We are still engaged in those talks. We have had some replenishments. We have our own checking account where we make payments to our vendors. But recently, replenishments for ARPA funding has not been replenished. And so we have vendors that continue to call us for those replenishments based on those earlier encumbrances and services that have been delivered to us. And so those are what we continue to have discussions on. Have there been replenishments? Yes. I think they're on the smaller amounts, but there are bigger amount replenishments that are waiting. And that's where we're at. Do we still have ARPA funding? Our hope is yes, we still do. Under the DOT guidelines that we received this funding premised under, we have the grant award. However, given the funding levels and I guess confirmation, we are now 5 months into this administration, and we're waiting for in continuing partnership and discussions with them. We're waiting for confirmation on what is that final number.
Thank you. And I believe we have the Secretary of Finance will be here, I think, Tuesday of next week. So we want to touch base as well. I believe Ms. Villagomez is here to clarify some of that if she chooses to. uh, Before I open up the floor, I want to recognize our SNAO chairman who's present, Rep. John Paul, and our chairman for education, Rep. Manny Tenorio. And I'll open up the floor to other members. Rep. Sablon.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, justices and judges and your team. I just have two questions, and perhaps the first one would be these vacant positions that are unfunded. Are they just recently unfunded, or are they been unfunded?
Thank you, Chairman Sablan. Yes, they are unfunded and they are original FTEs that we have had since, I want to say 2 to 3 fiscal years ago. We have maintained requesting for the executive branch as well as legislative, that during the budgeting process, regardless of revenue source, to keep that that FTE count the same, and depending again on resources, to fund them if possible. But are they just recently unfunded? No, they've been unfunded. We just continue to ask to maintain that number because they are continuing needs. We asked for that. We asked for those positions pre-pandemic. The need continued through the pandemic and more so now post-pandemic. We tried to fill other positions through grant funding, but have not been successful in being able to fund them that way.
Thank you for that response, Ms. Camacho. And my last question would be, I guess, just hearing the presentation, uh, the top priority is to provide additional 900 to the 300K to meet the 1.2 million. That's really one of the big priorities of the judiciary. Is that correct?
That would be our annual need. So that's just to provide for legislation for what we need for fiscal year 2024 with respect to utilities. But we're also requesting for an additional 2.7 million to cover the arrears. We are currently in discussion with the executive branch, and the governor has been very helpful in this regard with respect to our disconnection notice to CUC. That is the amount that CUC is claiming we owe it to prevent full disconnection. We have contested one of the amounts, and that is for the water and sewer usage for the Guma Justicia. And they have sent engineers to review the meter and some other variables that are that they think is creating those amounts. But if we look at, we have a utility slide. If you look on the screen, as of July last year, we saw a huge spike. We went, our utility use, I want to say maybe jumped by 18,000%. I'm sorry, our water use. And so that's why we are, there is a set aside figure that CUC has agreed to while we look at that and see if that amount is truly owed or if there are some areas where they can be considered as not owed and we will be excused from it. But from the looks of discussions, their position is that that amount still remains and it is there. And so we ask that in addition to our annual coverage for utilities, that this committee also consider that we pay these arrears. As you heard earlier, the bench members are arbiters of law. These are the very types of cases that come before us, non-payment of arrears. And so as a judicial system, when these amounts are not paid, it erodes the confidence in the system itself. And the reason why these arrears came this way is we were assured by prior leadership that they would be combined and paid with the central government's CUC billings under ARPA. Moving forward, that obviously didn't happen, but the fact of the matter is that's what's owed, and so that's why we're asking for that supplemental amount on top of the 900,000. That would be our general annual amount. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you for your response. Are you for now, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. I believe you. Uh, Let me recognize our Vice Speaker and our member, Rep. Joe Camacho. Thank you, Lai, for being present today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, CJ, Justices, PJ, Associate Judge, and members of the judicial team. Thank you for joining us this morning. Just a follow-up question on Rep. John Paul Sablan regarding the vacancies. I know that you guys are listing them down, but there's no like dollar figure, at least to allow the account to be alive. Because let's say you get external funds for potential grants or federal fund opportunities that can fund these positions. These positions can never be filled without the actual dollar figure in them. Is that something that the judicial is considering, that we at least put some amount into these vacant positions so that they can remain alive should there's additional funds within our collections here in the CNMI or other external funds that can address these positions?
Thank you for that question. If I can answer it with another question, when you say they are listed with $0, are you referencing the governor's submission or the judiciary submission?
This is from the governor's submission.
That's what
Um,
they're proposing, that it
yes,
remain unfunded. But in,
that's why I'm asking the judicial, would they consider that as part of the ask from this body, that we put at least a dollar figure in there so that the account remains alive and open should additional funds be realized, with whether it's the CNMI government or uh, federal grants. Is that something that's an ask from the judicial branch?
yes,
Okay.
if there are no additional funds, yes, that would be the option that we would prefer. But if there are funds, to just fund it at the salary that we have listed under our budget request.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we would like as well.
Thank
But
you.
we're working with what was submitted to us, and we're obviously looking at two different submissions, one from the judicial branch and one from the executive branch. And what we have to go by right now is what the executive branch is submitted this way, because that's the numbers that we're working with, right? So that's just an ask, and obviously it's a yes, and we would like to fund everybody the full amount so that everybody can function. The second question is, what about the ARPA, temporary ARPA employees? Do you guys have any temporary ARPA hires?
Yes, we do.
How many?
We have 12 currently on board now.
Are they being transitioned in to be a part of the judicial budget, or are they just temporary, as ARPA was meant for them to be temporary?
So our fiscal year 2024 budget requests for a total of 158 FTEs. That's asking for additional numbers on top of our current 127 that's allocated to us. And these positions are the part of the reason why we would like to retain these individuals, because there is a continuing need for them. As an example, we have 3 new information systems employees that came to us by way of ARPA, and as they have come on board and started services and programs for all 3 islands, we it would be hard to conceive a judiciary without these 3 employees, as well as our ARPA scanning clerks. You heard from Justice Enos earlier, there are millions of documents that impact adoptions, land use, marriages from prior years that are still in paper form that need to be scanned and made available to court users. As it is now, people who come in and request for those have to wait sometimes days so that we can go back and look at physical records to provide these to parties and families, especially also in times of emergency, those documents become relevant. So our ARPA scanning clerks, which are now, their contracts would expire in 2024. The new FTEs that we are seeking is to retain those FTEs and those persons.
Okay, but currently they're budgeted till 2024 under ARPA.
Currently, they have contracts that run till 2024, but in line with our discussions with the executive branch, everything is contingent on what the final ARPA number is that they find, and whether there is money with respect to ARPA accounts, and whether these grants that were allocated to us will be honored.
Thank you for that. May I ask how much in federal funds does the judicial branch receive from different grants, CJPA or any other external federal grants?
Our number is over 2 million as of recent. Josie, we have that slide. But we have several grants from the BJA. The drug court has a grant, and that has over $800,000. That is a multiple year grant. This is the final year of that grant. We hope to seek an extension of it, but there is $800,000 available in that grant for drug court program costs. And then we have the $303,000 from that was made possible through Congressman Kalili's efforts for the review of whether the CNMI Judiciary has the capacity to open up a veterans treatment court. And then we have from the annual competitive grants are the Criminal Justice Agency grants, and then we have the USDA, and we put SNILD on there because it is funding that is separate from our local appropriations. And so the slide you see is currently what we have, and have yet to remain to expend before the end of this fiscal year. Some of them will run into next fiscal year, but not all of them.
Thank you for that. How many revolving accounts does the judicial branch have?
The judicial branch has 4 revolving accounts. One may not be deemed a revolving account, but
How much in each revolving account?
we currently have approximately, I want to say, over 2 million in those revolving accounts, but they are specific to statutory requirements. And so we are prevented from tapping into those accounts for certain areas of our operations that we have asked and sought funding for under the local budget. So we have the LRC, the Law Revision Commission has a revolving account. The Drug Court has a revolving account. We have the Office of Adult Probation, that is also a revolving account. It's not a revolving account, but it is the abandoned funds account, and that is administered through funds that, third-party funds, fiduciary funds that have sat with the courts for a set number of, a period of time. We announce to the public, given the requirements under that statute, to come and claim those dollars. And after that time has lapsed, and it's usually more than a year, then we can reclaim it back, and the statute allows us to use it to pay for indigent fees. That has happened, and this is what our expenditures has been under that account.
Okay. So with what you just said, is a judicial requesting specific language to this current budget to allow some flexibility to utilize the revolving accounts to address the needs of the judicial branch?
Not at this time, because the amendments to those statutes would be specific to those statutes. So an example is the Judicial Building Fund. That there is a statute that exists for that, but we cannot touch those funds because we are already in the process of negotiations with the USDA. We have a preliminary approval for that USDA loan, and so to touch it through the budgeting process, which is a temporary process, would impact that long-term, the long-term requirements under that statute.
I totally agree. But just for the temporary basis and whether there's negotiations or not, the judicial system is very good and they're very bright. They understand that the notwithstanding provisions also allows that to happen. So you don't have to do it, but it's going to be an option to be able to utilize it should there's a need when it comes within the fiscal year.
I will defer to the Chief Justice, who's our expenditure authority.
That is a very tough question. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Like Sonia mentioned earlier, some of these statutes, when they were, some of these accounts, revolving accounts, they were set up to accomplish something. And as we move forward, and then every now and then we come in and take money out of that account and try to move the canoe to another direction. It's going to be like, for example, the courthouse in Tenian. When I first became a judge, it was a very good appropriation. When we move forward, and every time the court at that time looks at the funding, there's no more funding. It's been moved out of that account for another reason. So that's why the judiciary has a strategic plan. What do we want to accomplish the next 5 years, the next 10 years? And then we have all of these revolving funds or accounts, and we try to reach that goal. I do not it is going to be a policy question for the legislature. Of course, this body can always change the statute, and I'm not going to argue with that. I just respectfully ask to that we keep those targets, we keep those goals in mind, even though there may be a time that we borrow the money now and return it tomorrow. I think in finance we call that journal voucher. Please don't do a journal voucher for these accounts. Thank you.
Thank you for that, CJ. And like you said, this is a policy call on the legislative side. It's also a policy call on the judicial side. If that language is there, it gives you the opportunity to make that policy call. If that language is there, doesn't give you that opportunity, right? I'm just putting it out there, and maybe something that the judicial might be in support of when that language is, if that language should be included in the budget, that maybe whatever is appropriated to the judicial branch, there's also a language in this current fiscal year that would allow the would allow the judicial branch to encumber those funds beyond the fiscal year. So it's not limited to within this fiscal year. You can take it over to the next fiscal year and not worry about the deficit reduction being pulled from the judicial branch. Would that be something that the judicial branch would consider? Is including that language to allow some flexibility on your on your revolving accounts in addition to a language that allows you to encumber beyond the fiscal year of 2024?
I have no problem with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ. So the loan from the retirement fund, how much is owed? How much more is owed to that?
Uh, Mr. Vice Speaker, that has been fully paid as mentioned in our budget proposal and in the annual report, and that was paid in full in March of 2022.
All right, thank you for that. So, and then, so those monies that are currently or were supposedly being held in accord for the payment of the building, are those monies being held at the court under a revolving account now?
These fines and fees that were collected, they go directly to a Department of Finance account. It doesn't rest with the court. So we are just a conduit. But I know that I hope that they're still untouched because there's a specific law that says it's for the judiciary.
Yeah, that was actually my next question because we understand that upon the completion of that loan payment, that the judicial branch will be able to access back those monies and be distributed to the Department of Public Safety, which actually held corrections and fire at the same time back when that loan was first negotiated, correct?
No, the current statute does not have any language as to Department of Public Safety or DOC. It's the Judiciary Building Fund. Now I think that was the previous I guess header, and now it's the justice system. So as mentioned earlier, we have a loan application with USDA, but of course there was a snag in DC when the application was submitted. We need to include I guess, other financial institutions in the process for procurement purposes. And there was a draft legislation submitted previously, and that has not gone a step or two. Okay,
Thank you.
but we want to work on that because we looked at our strategic plan, and now I think we have to shift the focus to the treatment courts facility. Our current facilities and offices and treatment centers just cannot work in the Gumostisha. So we are looking at that direction and use the fines and fees to focus on the treatment court center. And what is that center? That will entail mental health courts, drug court, veterans court, and possibly the probation office. Because right now the probation office is situated in the back near the RSAT and with a tin roof. And so, of course, we have all of those offices to consider in the next capital improvement for the judiciary.
Thank you, Justice. How about the $7 million appropriation that was made about 6, 7 years ago? Have they all been remitted to the judicial branch, or do we have to amend that statute to allow for other programs to be
I think,
assisted?
Vice Speaker, you are referring to the $7 million of HVAC funding that was given to the judiciary. Um, We have successfully completed our HVAC and mold remediation and removal project. And of course, we were displaced for about 2 or 3 years in different areas of Susupi. So that was completed. Out of the $7 million, we spent about 5.9 million, close to $6 million for mold remediation and displacement expenses. So what is left, from my recollection, is about $900,000. But part of the spending plan of the 7 million includes solar and also smoke and fire alarm system. We have engaged the services of consultants for an assessment as to the smoke alarm system. And now, we're just waiting. Is the funding still there? The $900,000. I would like to be optimistic, but given the recent news, I will just reserve my comments.
If I may add, the original contractor on the HVAC is still owed some funds under that particular statute. The primary vendor is owed, if I'm not mistaken, approximately $500,000 still. But the remaining balance of those funds, we have encumbered towards the cost of the fire alarm system.
And if I may add, Mr. Vice, a report on the final report on the HVAC expenditures was submitted to the legislature, to the executive branch and DOF. So that was submitted last year. Yes, so we can resubmit it, and it's also available on our website, I believe. So it's a comprehensive report on all the expenditures, all the contracts under the HVAC $7 million project.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And maybe with that submission, I know that you said that you want to encumber a certain amount to the fire system. So obviously, we would need to amend that statute to allow those monies to address that. So maybe you can send a letter to the chairman of Ways and Means, and we'll work on that legislation to take those monies to address, or the remainder of those monies.
I don't think that's necessary because in the budget approval process for the $7 million, the judiciary submitted a spending plan, and it was very specific. And it includes smoke alarm and, of course, a solar system. So it is there, and it's in the report, in the final report. So any amendment may not be necessary, but of course, if you want, you can do
Yeah.
that.
I would totally agree, Justice, and that was essentially the legislative intent. But the way the bill was written was specific to the HVAC uh, requests from the judicial branch. The way that bill was written out, so whatever was submitted was only a drawdown to address the HVAC. But the legislative intent during the discussion or the deliberation on the $7 million for the judicial branch was inclusive of that. Unfortunately, you're going to have too many different lawyers looking at that statute and say, "Oh, this is only what it says." The other lawyers would say, "Well, legislative intent." In my personal opinion, I think legislative intent is important, but then we got to trace back the
Okay.
journals to marry the discussions on that specific
Yeah,
statute.
I understand. But okay, that's welcome if you want to amend
I
it
mean,
to
I'm
include.
I'm good with you guys
Yeah.
using the money. I just don't want another lawyer from another side saying, "Well, it only says this." I agree with you that it should be flexible, but unfortunately, sometimes the language on the statute itself is,
Yes.
too many opinions, I guess.
Okay, understandable.
Uh,
Yeah,
but if it's possible, and I guess finance is not here, but if finance were here, we would definitely ask that they allow the judicial branch to go ahead and proceed with the remaining of those funds to address the needs as per the legislative intent back in the 20th legislature when we were negotiating the $7 million for the judicial branch.
Okay.
And thank you. I yield for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Rep. Ato, Rep. Manny, and then Rep. Flores.
Welcome, Chief Justice and Justices team from the Judicial Branch. And also thank you, Vice Chair, for asking the question that I was going to ask regarding the building fund. So in line with that question that was posed earlier, the Public Law 725, and there was also several other public laws. I wanted to find out when people are given a citation, like let's say traffic, and they have to go to the court, are there the fees from that citation? Do they go to the court or do they go to the general fund, or how does that work? Because in other jurisdictions they don't have to go to the court.
So the fees collected from the traffic citations go to an account held by the Secretary of Finance. And in the original bill for the Judicial Building Fund, it went to pay for the loan, excuse me, for the courthouse. Since that loan has been paid, there is this special setup. It's called the Justice Fund. That's where those funds go to. And there is an existing statute that says we are working on a direct loan with the United States Department of Agriculture for the rehabilitation of the Guma Justicia, as well as for payoff of that loan. Since that loan has been paid off, there's additional clause in the existing statute that explains what the funds are for, and it goes towards exclusively for a loan if we do receive one. And then after that loan is paid off, then there's a percentage that's set aside for the continuing rehabilitation of the building.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a long answer to where do those fees go? Physically, it goes in an account held by the Secretary of Finance, but the outright results, it sits in account for the judiciary buildings. Yeah.
Okay. Not that I want to take away funds from the court, but the fact that the loan is paid off, there's also other government facilities that may need rehabilitation as well. So that's why I posed that question. I do also ask that, and I'm sure that the judiciary will do this, but if we're gonna upgrade the fire system, because the pipes that I'm seeing here are sprinkler systems, but maybe we can look into fire suppression systems if it's a better alternative. Because when the sprinklers go off, it damages all the beautiful carpet and everything, wood in the courthouse, versus the suppression, which is gases and several things that would just suppress the fire. So don't worry, I'm not gonna really look into that bill, but I just wanted, because I believe that the Department of Public Safety should also get a portion of those citations so that they can improve their facility, especially if we're looking at cases, right? Evidence is everything, and if your forensic side on the Department of Public Safety is lacking, then you don't have a case. So we also need to build up DPS's capacity in that regard to science. The other question, or actually it's more of a statement. I want to say thank you for putting in an additional FTE for the recorder's office. Having visited your recorder's office and having been in charge of records at the Northern Marianas College for a long time, there's been a lot of improvements. In fact, it's probably a model for the entire government agency. So that's really good to know that unit within the judiciary is getting the help and support, and I think we should also continue to take it a step further a lot of the team there, they need some professional development as well. The fact that they were able to do what they have done in a short amount of time. I mean, we have records at when I used to work at the Northern Marianas College since 1981, and we're over 50,000 maybe records. But with the court, it's a lot of really expensive records. You're talking about land deeds and transactions, and one binder going missing is like in the millions. So um, thank you for putting some money and that request specifically for the recorder's office. I want, like, DLNR was in here not too long ago, and the records there, that's like a horror story. So please, I need to look into the enabling legislation. um, if those records should still be at DLNR, or are they supposed to be at the court, given that the recorder's office was opened several years ago. But again, thank you. And don't worry, we're not going to touch that fund building, but maybe we need to give a little bit to other agencies so that they can help you guys do what you guys do best. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Castro. Go ahead,
But
Justice.
I was just going to comment, thank you. You have prevented a sleepless night.
Thank you, Justice. I now recognize. Oh, Son, you want to say something with that before I recognize Rep. Flores?
I just want to thank you for that, and I really appreciate those. It's our staff will appreciate what you just said, Rep. Manny.
Okay, go ahead with your campaign speech.
Oh, this is not.
I'm just joking.
I think that's for Rep. Marissa, but since the previous legislature enabled legislation for the judiciary to handle its own procurement, I didn't see an additional FTE in the procurement side of the court. Given that this is one entire branch of government, how many FTEs are on the procurement side of the judiciary?
We do have one that we're requesting for under the court Office of Court Administration for the Office of Procurement.
So there's going to be one additional, or just one for the entire court?
Right now, we have only one, the procurement officer herself, but we are requesting for one of the new FTEs, the administrative specialist that's supposedly for that office.
Thank you.
Yes. And if I may continue,
Sure.
I just wanted to add, the court is very cognizant of the hard work that our officers at DPS commit to with respect to traffic and keeping our streets safe. And so we agree that they put in a lot of effort in the interest of justice. And we're all partners in the criminal justice system. A couple of years back, there was some discussion as to the issue of traffic and how to address it CNMI wide. The statutes in place and the assessments in place are very aged. Very, very aged. And so when we talk about fees and fines and how to address that particular docket, it may require a bigger conversation than just the collection end of it. And so we'd like to start with the premise of why the laws were put in place, what the fees and fines are for those particular persons that break those laws, and see how to address collection from there. And Presiding Judge Naraha was a willing discussion panelist when the legislature called on us at that time, and there were some discussions as to how to move forward legislation to amend it, and we welcome those discussions again.
If I may. And as I mentioned earlier, we are venturing into e-citations, and that's another way. But just as e-recording entailed higher fees, e-citation will also entail some increase. To what extent, I don't know. It probably can accommodate whatever the needs are of DPS. But with the e-citation project, we will involve all three islands. Every week we meet on e-citation and e-courts in general. And we hope to have the patrol cars out there equipped with durable laptops so that they can just issue citations out there. It just goes through the system, court scheduling, payment of fines from the streets. So that is an area that we can take a look at where both the judiciary and DPS can share in the fees collected. The public might not like those fees, though, just as we receive comments about e-recording. But thank you for your concern, Congressman.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you again, Rep. Castro. Did you want to? Do you still have the floor, or did you yield your time?
Oh, just one last thing. Hopefully, when the judiciary masters the e-citations part, they also do PD to the other agencies like DPL that also issue citations to Fish and Wildlife, so that we can get all these fines or penalties in real time, which will help the provide better services for the government. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Castro. If there's a response, PJ, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Basically, I'm chairing the traffic TRCC, Traffic Record Communication Committee at DPS. So we take care of all these issues. We're working on the e-citation, but we are about to create also a group that would revisit the fees and fines of traffic. Awaiting the commissioner to go forward with that. So yeah, it's in the works.
Thank you, PJ. With I recognize Rep. Flores, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Rep. Castro, for giving me some time. He's on the campaign trail. I just kind of sit here quietly until they address me to speak. Yeah, so I usually go last because I'm a woman. But thank you, Vice Chair, for that. So I have several questions, and I guess I probably need to ask fast because they're going to tell me to hurry up because it's lunchtime. So my first question, and I guess you have your fiscal manager here, on the Justice Center Fund, 15% of that should be allocated to the supplement and maintenance needs of the judiciary facilities. And then the remaining funds should be put into the general account for legislative appropriation, correct? And that part of that 85% is what you guys are hoping that you can tap into. Am I right? Yes.
Without bordering interpretation of law, my understanding is that the statute, the way it was crafted, was to address the payment of the loan first.
Correct, but it's been paid off already.
Oh, no, the new USDA loan, the
Okay.
upcoming loan.
The upcoming, which I read in your annual report.
Yeah, which
Right.
is not, which hasn't been received yet.
Okay.
So after that's paid,
Mhm.
then it goes, then that's when the future legislation can be considered, with 15% held
For you guys.
for maintenance of the buildings. So
Correct.
that we don't come back for an HVAC issue.
Yes.
We don't come back for replacement of materials
Okay.
after 25 years.
All right, got it. So the next one is the probation services fund. How much is left in that account?
We have, Josie can pull there,
That's
as of
left?
March, there you go.
91,000. And annually, and this is used for training, correct? For your probation
It's used-
officers and client services and programs.
Yes,
Okay, so how much of that is for, and for salaries? So does a big portion of that go to salaries of the probation officers?
no, not at this time.
No percentage?
No percentage. There was at some point during austerity years
Uh-huh.
where we tapped it to retain staff that was federally funded,
Uh-huh.
and to have those positions remain.
Mhm.
But that practice ended,
Mhm.
and now these are exclusively for probationers' services.
Okay, so client services and programs, 0%.
Client services and programs.
Because it says for training and salaries of probation officers and client services and programs.
For training, yes, we have our probation officers travel
Mhm.
for the annual APPA,
Mhm.
the American Probation and Parole Association,
Mhm.
and those they go there routinely to receive.
And that's
I'm sorry,
training.
the standards that need to be met annually
Mhm.
for probation officers, and then the incentives for probationers themselves, people that are on probation, funds are allocated for that
And a
purpose.
percentage of that is how much?
I don't have that percentage ready, but we can get that
Sure.
to you in figures.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
Yes.
And then it says here, the Secretary of Finance shall submit an annual financial report by January 9, detailing the funds receipts and expenditures to the presiding judge of the Superior Court and the legislature. Do you know if that's been done?
To my knowledge, that has not been done, but when we do ask for fund statuses,
Mhm.
we receive it directly from the Department of Finance's Finance and Accounting section. We have a standing request to be granted access to the accounts
Mhm.
on Munis, because since the transition from JDE to Munis, it has been hard to see what's available and how the costs are being allocated.
Mhm.
But in prior discussions, that was how the reporting was received by us, is by granting us access, so it's real time.
Okay, so when was the last time you received an actual report from the Secretary of Finance?
Let me ask our chief probation officer to answer that question, because she is the person who runs that office and would be making those requests.
But it would be given to the presiding judge, correct? But she would have to make the request, but it goes to the presiding judge.
Yes.
Okay,
She makes the request on behalf of the presiding
got it.
judge. Yes.
Okay. So just when was the last time you actually received a report on January 9 for this particular revolving fund status? Never is an answer to, or 10 years? Probably never.
I would not have that answer at the moment.
Okay.
I would have to refer to my administrator
Sure.
at the Office of the Operations. She would have that on Munis, but I don't believe I requested one. Yes.
Okay, well, just because under the title it says that it's supposed to be given to the PJ and to us. So if you can make that request, and maybe by year, maybe the last 5 years,
That definitely done.
yeah, and then you can give it to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the disposition of abandoned property. So can you go back to that slide that showed us how much money you guys have left?
Oh, that's the abandoned funds
Mhm.
statute.
Yes.
Josie, can we take us to the Abandoned Funds Act? There you go.
So hearing dates. When you say amount, 1,100, that's all that you got? Is that the income? Or is that
That's how
expense?
much we've dispersed.
Dispersed,
Yeah.
okay.
So what happens is the court collects third-party monies, child support, bail, and rental amounts for
Mhm.
different items in probate that are withheld through court orders. It sits in a fiduciary account held at the banks,
Mhm.
and then as court orders are issued, we go to disperse those funds based on what the court order says. And so if it's on child support, then of course we issue the child support. If it's on bail, then we exonerate bail when the case is completed, or it's gone to pay for victims' costs or repair costs under those criminal cases. But when especially in a criminal or traffic case, when the case is completed or disposed, there's the issue of bail. Sometimes those bail monies sit unclaimed.
Mhm.
And so what this law allows us to do is if they remain unclaimed, the
Mhm.
court has to complete certain steps to announce to the public, this money's available. If it's yours, come and claim it.
Mhm.
After a certain period of time, if it doesn't, if it's unclaimed, then it goes to an account that's administered by the court to pay for indigent fees.
Mhm.
And so what we have done when we've exhausted that process, our budget and finance director has to go before a judge and certify that these steps have happened
Okay.
before we actually touch the monies.
Okay.
And then once the monies are dispersed, what we have used it for is to pay for indigent defense costs, which are attorney's fees or interpreters.
Okay, and that is just focused strictly for criminal cases, or can that go to civil cases as well?
If there are abandoned funds in civil cases, that caused incarceration and
Mhm.
bail, then yes.
Okay, so what kind of account is it in? Is it at a checking account, saving account, interest bearing, and what is it?
It's not in an interest-bearing
It's
account.
just a
in
regular checking
It's a
account?
checking account.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next one is, um, before I get into commending you guys on a beautiful job, the ticket citations and the e-ticket migration that you guys are on right now. I do understand certain fees or the minimal fees for ticket citation is $25. Is that still stand as $25? Okay, and then I do understand that there was at some point the traffic attorney representing the AG's office had also completed a study in which was submitted to the office of the presiding judge. And I think what happens now is that I believe that all that needs to happen to increase these fees is for it to be posted in the, I guess, your area there where you post the changing of fees at the court for a minimum of 30 days in order for it to change. Has that been done?
I believe we 2 times modified the traffic fees.
Mhm,
I believe that was 7 years ago.
mhm.
And so that has gone through the process, yes.
Okay, so it has been posted and there was an increase.
It's in the statute, yes.
Okay, so it's still $25 or has it changed?
It's some of them increased.
Okay, all right. And that is strictly for the court, all the money received,
I think so.
100%.
That is the Justice Fund, Center Fund right now?
It goes into that fund?
The Justice
Yes.
Fund, yes.
Okay, all right.
If I may add, Congresswoman, so the court fees, those are being addressed by the court, but the fees and fines for the actual violation, those would be in your realm. From what I understand, $25 fine is no longer a deterrent during this time.
Mhm. Okay, all right. And then last one, and then I really get to the commending part. Um, so I know that CJ is the administrator, or I guess the head lead when it comes to the CJPA program, the agency. And there are about 5 grants, I believe, or 4 grants that, 5 grants that I guess the court can avail of some monies, or is it based on different grants? So let me take, for instance, the stop formula grant. This grant can also be used for personnel for victim services, and it can cover salaries, wages, benefits of social workers, case workers, shelters, personnel, and it can also be used for local courts. Are you guys involved in any of this monies and grants? Does a portion of it go to the court on each of these grants, or do you not avail of any percentages or portions from these grants?
Congresswoman, allow me to answer that question. So CJ is
It works.
presiding judge is a member of the supervisory council, and including DPS, PSS, Indigenous Affairs, Carolinian Affairs, I'm sorry, and then Tini and Rhoda, lots of women representative, community members. I sit in for PJ, and yes, we do avail of it. So these are all formula grants. CJPA does not apply. AG, uh, out, and then whatever isn't, that's when other subgrantees will apply for it. So we do apply. The Marshals Division applies, probation applies, drug court applies, mental health court applies, family court applies for the portions that are not already identified through the grant. So I know that DPS hires, I think through VAWA, they hire an employee. I know CareDot hires employees also through the grants, through VOCA and VAWA. Um, I we don't have any FTEs under the grants, and the primary reason for that is we are not given that kind of allocation that allows us to do that, and so we don't want to put anybody on a grant FTE, and then if we don't get that same amount the following year, right, then we have to terminate the person.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So now I'm going to get to the praise, and I'm going to commend you on a wonderful job. I think the migration into the e-ticketing format is great. It's a big step forward, and it's very progressive. And the mental health court, I might I might say, is a huge leap into addressing the behavioral issues that we see come up every day in the newspaper. And rather than, I'm very tough on crime, but I'm also cognizant that there are some underlying issues that play when it comes to an individual's behavior, when it comes to either breaking the law or doing something that they can't control. So again, thank you so much. I love that you guys are taking a very big step and a very huge step forward, and very progressive. So I appreciate you guys, and thank you so much for your services. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Flores. And I do believe I'm going to take one more if there's none. Rep. Camacho, I want to wrap it up. I know the judges are busy and I don't want to take too much time off their schedule. I think we can work this out with Ms. Camacho. I'll now recognize Rep. Camacho.
Thank you, Chair. I'll wrap it up for the committee. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, Chief Justice and everybody else. All the questions that's been asked was really a long list of my questions that I wanted to ask. But first, I want to thank Judge Tenorio. I was at the graduation. It's very evident that what the courts are doing is significant and very important. Who else was there? You guys saw it. For giving people a second chance, no, especially repeats. That was very, very, very exciting for me. I really liked it. And then the Veterans Treatment Center, wow, or court, right? How old is that? No problem.
So the veterans program basically focuses on the mental health court docket. We put a part on veterans so that the grant that we received from Congressman Khalili, we can explore that to build on it. And so we're doing that now.
That's really wonderful. A lot of suicide out there right now. But anyway, thank you very much for what you do. I fully support the judicial's budget request. So with that, to this August body, if you support the budget for the judicial system, please say yes or say aye, whichever one. So anyway, it's really cold in here. I can't think. But all the questions have been asked, and I thank you, judicial branch, for doing exactly what you say you're gonna do. And I ask this August body one more time. Let's help them out and give them all the support they need. We need that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. And if there's no further, thank you, CJ and Chief Justice, Justices, and Associate Judge for making time. I know this will not be the first round. I believe Ms. Camacho will be uh, uh, reaching out to us. We're trying to finish the budget within the next 2 to 3 weeks, House version. So I do understand most of the time the judges will appear in the lower house, and then I believe Miss Sonia will be the only one in the Senate. So we'll try to address all the needs in the coming weeks. I do know that this Department of Finance will be here, so uh, ask some clarifying questions with regards to the judicial, especially with the utilities and the all others, no. And with that, I'll offer the floor back to the CJ to, if any, for closing remark for any members.
Let me just say, donc nous nous Jesus Mose for giving us this opportunity, and I hope that the House would grant our budget request, Jesus Mose.
Thank you, CJ. Any Justice Mangonia?
I'll be brief. Last month, we celebrated Law Month, Law Week, and the theme this year was civics, civility, and collaboration. So I like to focus on collaboration because it's been working with the Department of Finance and OMB. They've been really helpful with Secretary of Finance, also the House of Representatives in previous years, and also the Senate. And this year we've had a lot of good luck with the Lieutenant Governor and Governor. So collaboration is working, and it was a very appropriate theme. Thank you so much for inviting us and for hearing us out. Uh, we care about the judiciary and the CNMI in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Manglonia. And with that, if there's no further, I will now adjourn this budget hearing. Thank you.